Hello, Grant.
Hello, Sean. How you doing?
Hey, excellent. Thank you very much for joining us. Where in the world are you presently?
I'm in Canada. I live right above North Dakota in the coldest major city in the world, Winnipeg.
Making me feel better about London temperatures. What got you into UFOs in the first place? It wasn't the Invaders, was it? With what was it, David Vincent, Gene Vincent?
It was 2 weeks after the end of the Vietnam War. I was a university student, about 25 miles north of the U.S. border. There was reports that there was a UFO being seen almost nightly. I had no interest in the subject, and yet I said to my friends, "Let's go see what everybody's looking at." We didn't go for 3 months. And then a local TV station captured this thing jumping off the ground from ground level to 5,000 feet in the air in about was it 3 frames of film. And then I said, "Come on, let's go see. Let's go see what they're looking at." Went out there. We're there for an hour, and nothing happened. My friend said, "Okay, we'll go back into Carmen, which is the name of the town. We'll go back in. If we don't see anything, let's go home." I said, "Fantastic. This has been a total waste of time." We turned the car around to go back into town one more time. The thing flew right in front of the car, and everybody went, "There it is." Everybody instinctively knew what it was. I went down a rabbit hole. I couldn't believe what I'd seen. I went out 2 nights later. The thing came right at me the second night, and the rest is history. I've just sort of followed one mystery after another as it's unfolded over almost the last 50 years.
I just want to remind the viewers then that Grant is the recipient of the Leeds Conference International Researcher of the Year and the UFO Congress Researcher of the Year. And he's referring to a UFO type object which locally became known as Charlie Red Star. How old are you? How old are you when you experienced this?
I was 21.
And what was going through your head then? I mean, did it make you reevaluate your worldview?
Oh, absolutely. We're getting an echo here. Hang on.
You sound okay to me. Let's Does he sound okay, viewers? Everyone sound okay?
Okay. I think we're okay now. So your question was what again?
Yeah, I mean, did this make you change your worldview
Oh, absolutely.
experiencing Charlie Red
Absolutely.
Star?
Yeah, it's absolutely changed my worldview a number of times. It's just been one thing after another. Nothing that I really intended or that happened to me, I actually intended to have happen to me. I had that, and I suddenly realized like this stuff's for real. I mean, you hear about it, but that's what I tell people. Until you've actually experienced it, it's unbelievable. It's like because I saw it, and then I was wondering like what's it doing. So the second night it came right at me, and then it made this sort of a little turn, and it sort of flew off into the northeast, and then it was years later. I suddenly realized myself, because that night I was sitting to myself, I said, "What's it doing? It's not doing anything. It's just there." And it was just, and then I went, not 30 years later, I talked to the guy who would run the local airport there, and I said, "Bob, why have you come to this little town outside of in Manitoba? There's nothing here. There's no industry. There's no weapons. There was nothing." He said, "You know why they're here?" And I said, "No, Bob, I don't know why they're here." 35 years at that point, I said, "I have no idea why they're here." And he said, "Well," he said, "the nuclear missiles. I told you it was the nuclear missiles." And what had happened was we live right on the border, and right below us is what's called the Grand Forks field and the Minot field of nuclear weapons. There's 300 nuclear missiles, Minuteman III missiles, just on the other side of the border. And in 1975, when the sighting started, they put in what was called the only anti-ballistic missile unit that ever went operational. So this is pre-Star Wars, and what they were going to do is they put these missiles into, if the Russians launched, they would try to get them in outer space, and if they couldn't get them there, they would get them as they were coming in, and they put 100 new nuclear missiles. That's when all this stuff started. And so I had that experience, and I thought it was ET, and I was sort of following it or whatever. And then in 2012, I have the download experience where I'm watching Colin Andrews give a lecture. And again, I have no interest in crop circles. I could care less. I was at this big conference, and I figured, well, Colin Andrews is a big time guy, and he was in a lot of trouble at that point because he was saying 80% of them were being hoaxed at the time. And I thought, well, I should go watch this. I've never seen this guy lecture. I went in, and that's when I got the download experience, where it basically said, that 1975, you're wondering like what the heck's going on, what's it doing? It's all consciousness. And that just flipped my world upside down. And then in 2017, I had another download experience, which was much longer, which basically again flipped my world upside down. And now I'm sort of in a situation where I'm more moved into what the Easterners believed maybe 5,000 years ago, what John Wheeler, the guy who was the intellectual successor to Einstein at Princeton, said, I would not be at all surprised if the entire universe turned out to be a figment of the imagination. That's where this thing is heading for me. I mean, after 50 years of doing this, that there may not be a physical world, there may not be time, space. This is all just a big giant kabuki theater. And so that's where I am now. Completely different world than I was, where I was in 1975. And I think the UFO community, they're at different levels. People are doing different things. And I just think it's 1,000 times more complex than people think it is. It's going to be, I would bet in the end, it's going to be all spiritual. The whole thing's a spiritual deal. The physical world's going to fade away. Just a completely different world than when I first had this experience in 1975. And as I said, I had no interest in UFOs. I was interested in life after death. I had done a study at the university on weird things that happen around people who die and stuff like that. But UFOs had no interest whatsoever.
All right. Are we okay to go over Charlie Red Star a little bit more? Because
Sure.
I'm fascinated by this. So before you saw it, where were you exactly? What were your surroundings?
Well, we were in this town, so we'd gone and we'd heard that people were seeing this and almost every night. And I describe it as you buy the lottery ticket and there's a chance you can win, but you're not going to win. I mean, there's no way. Everybody else saw it. You're going to go out there and nothing's going to happen. So that's what happened. We went out there. We're driving into town. We're driving around and we're looking around and like, what's everybody looking at? And I had no background in astronomy or anything. I didn't know anything. And we're going like, what are they looking at? We see a planet like Venus was setting, and we were looking at it, and we're going, was that what they're looking at? And there's three guys in the car, and so we kept this thing of driving around, and we said, well, whatever it is they're looking at isn't very spectacular. And that's when my friend said, okay, we'll go back into town one more time, and if we don't, let's go back to Winnipeg, which is about 30 miles away. And it was at that point where we turned the car, we're on this road, and we turn it around, and this thing it's appeared from the left to the right. It looked like it was alive. It was like a plasma, red type plasma, and it was pulsing. It was sort of like going very slow, and it was just sort of like it was alive, and it was moving, and it was moving right in front of the car, down very low, like right in front of it. It was maybe 100 feet in the air, 200 feet in the air. It was moving at maybe 30 miles an hour, maybe not even that. And I can remember as it was going, it's like nobody in the car said, is that what they're looking at? Is that what everybody's looking at? Everybody just went, there it is. Everybody just instinctively knew this is what they were talking about. And I remember as the thing was going across, there was a set of school buses outside this town. And I realized this thing was so low, it was going to go in behind these school buses, and I wanted to see it. So the car was still moving, and I was getting out of the car. I was trying to run through this ditch across this parking lot so I could see it. And I remember I went to the between these buses, and I'm looking at this thing, and it was just slowly flying away. And that's why I said to Bob, I said, like, we used to make a joke. We said, like, what's it doing in Carmen? I mean, there's nothing here. And we used to make this joke because Canadians had very strong beer compared to American beer, which was like water. And we said, well, maybe they're coming from the United States to pick up beer and they're going back. And like, I didn't know. We all knew the nuclear missiles were there. But it was when my friend said it, I told you it was the nuclear missiles. And he told me the story about an Air Force guy at the border who had been at a bar had told him that they'd try to ram one of these things over a nuclear missile silo, and that he had pulled out of the formation at the last minute and this thing had gotten away. And then I went, oh yeah. And then it started to make sense. And a lot of the stuff, if you take a look at Rendlesham Forest, it all sort of makes sense. You start seeing this is where the Russians were going to go back into Poland in 1980. And that's where the tactical nuclear weapons were that they would be using at the Polish border if they wanted to protect Poland when Solidarity took over and the Russians were going to reinvade. And the UFOs come there and they shoot down the stuff at the beam into the nuclear weapons silo, and they're just sort of playing this game. And then you have John Burroughs who pulls his gun, he gets zapped, and then you have this what's her name, the girl on the second night had her gun. She's not supposed to have the gun on British territory. She has the blue orb go through the truck, and she freaks out and has a nervous breakdown. And it all starts to make sense after a while, that the fact that they're just sort of playing this sort of game, and the nuclear weapons is a big part of the story. The whole idea of consciousness is a big part of the story. And the number one message I would say that they're giving is it's all one thing. There is no separation. There is no nouns. This is one giant verb. We're all part of this thing. And it may, as John Wheeler, this guy that came up with black hole theory and wormhole theory, he's the guy that said there's no out there. This may be all a figment of the imagination. And so that's why we haven't gotten anywhere on this whole thing. We've been spinning it around thinking it's nuts and bolts, and we can't figure the thing out. And even if you've got hardware, People will talk about the fact that they had a ship, and I've known this for years. The rumor is always around that they had a ship that was completely intact that was given to them. And if you're familiar with the Wilson leak document that leaked out about the this admiral who goes looking for the UFO crashes, he said that he was told that they had a craft and they believed it could fly. And as soon as I said that, I said, I know what's going on, because I have 36 people that I interviewed who've flown the craft, and they all say the same thing. You go in, you put your hand on a panel, you put your hand on a ball. It's all conscious. It's all consciousness. And the fact that they have a craft means that they think it'll fly because they can't turn it on. You need a consciousness interface. You need somebody to put your hand on the craft. And so now it's more and more making sense to me. But it's, as I said, it's 1,000 times more complex than people think it is. It's almost like David Bohm had said, the famous physicist said, when you get to the bottom of the quantum physics thing and you get that thing all figured out, there's just another level below that. And I start to believe that. It's gotten so much more complex every time I looked at it, and more magnificent. And but in terms of life, I mean, that was the end of my life. I mean, I quit university. I just said, like, now I know what I'm going to do. I was in university. I didn't know what I was going to do. I couldn't figure out calculus. I couldn't, like, how do you make any money out of this crap? I couldn't believe, like, what am I doing here, at university? And as soon as this happened, my life flipped upside down, and I've been down the rabbit hole ever since.
All right, Grant. So you're in your early 20s. You lay eyes on this thing. As you're looking at it for those first few seconds, do you feel peaceful? Do you feel threatened? Do you feel mesmerized? What is your emotional state?
Absolutely mesmerized. I mean, it was like, it's for real. Like, you read about the stuff, like, I was raised very religious. So you read about the Bible and these miracles and stuff. You go like, yeah, miracles may happen in the Bible. There's no miracles. It was sort of like, nah, none of this weird stuff happens. And that's what people will do. It's like when it happens to them, then they sort of go down the rabbit hole. But I'd never seen anything. I'd never seen any sort of paranormal phenomena or any weird stuff. And it was like, it's actually for real. This is a real story. I was just so floored by the fact that this part of the world existed that had never, nobody talked about. And so then I was trying to figure out, like, why. I went out and I said, this is the biggest story of all times, man. And because most of the town had seen this thing. And it was like 59% of the kids, when I polled the high school, 59% of the kids said they'd seen something in the last 2 years. So I went there and I said, oh man, I'm going to make $1 million from this, man. And I went and I talked to all these people who had the sightings and the 32 horses that disappeared and all these bizarre stories. I put it all in a manuscript. And I went to the publishers in Toronto, and they were not adverse to it, but nobody wanted to publish it. And then I went to a local publisher here in Winnipeg, which is a fairly big city. And I remember I got the rejection letter back from her, and she should have published it because it was a famous story here. Everybody knew about the story. And she said, Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among the unbelievers. I went, what? Are you kidding me? It's like, I couldn't believe it. So after that, I've never been interested in UFO sightings. People will say, let's go on Skywatch. I go, no, I don't want to Skywatch. No. And then they'll finally talk me into going, and then they'll be sitting arguing about some light in the sky. Is it a star? Is it a planet? It's moving. It's not moving. I go, are you kidding me? I'm going to bed. Like, if you saw what I saw in 1975, this is a total waste of time. And that's the problem I think we have in trying to solve this thing, is we're chasing lights around in the sky, and every UFO is going to be different. It's a phenomena that can change. It can morph. It can do whatever it wants, almost like Skinwalker Ranch. Not only did it know what the people were going to do, or what they're doing, it knew exactly what they were going to do. And every time you went to catch it on camera, it would happen off camera. And they're playing this little game. So to me, it was just I call it being you would call it the World Cup. It's like you get to live in the World Cup every day. Some people get to go watch the game once in their life. I'm in it every day. You see this weird stuff. I've had so many bizarre stories of my own experiences now, and then talking to people with the reports and manifestations, stuff that appears and disappears, and just, I called the book Weird. It's the weirdest stuff you've ever seen, where like Skinwalker Ranch, where they take the bulls, and the guy's prize bulls all disappear, and then he's looking for them, and he sees this trailer, and he goes, wonder if they're in a trailer, and it's a locked trailer. He opens this trailer, and the bulls are inside the trailer. The woman comes home, she's got her groceries takes all her groceries out and puts them in the cupboard, and then she goes in the next room, comes back in, and all the groceries are back in the bag. It's that kind of weird stuff that when you start looking at this, it just gets weirder and weirder and weirder. And that's what I think they're doing. They're trying to get our attention, and what they're trying to do is say, in 1492 you believe the world was flat, and it was flat. And you believe the sun went around the earth? Nah, it's not right either. And as we go along, every time we discover something new, we discover we got something wrong. And that's what we're doing. We're saying, oh, we've got all the pieces of the puzzle. We're just waiting for one more piece. We'll put that piece in there and we'll figure it all out. And it's no, all the pieces are wrong. You got all the pieces. You're never going to figure this thing out. And I don't think they want us to figure it out. I think they want us to keep realizing that the world is not what you think it is. Because the more you look at the world and what they're doing, you realize that we've got so much wrong that it's not the world we think it is. And that's what they're doing there. It's almost like I talk about like a circus. It's like the time of Jesus. If Jesus hadn't walked on water, fed 5,000 people, done all the circus stuff he did, you never would have heard of the guy. And that's what they're doing. They're doing this weird stuff. Everybody's going, what's going on here? Like, and that's what happened to me. And it happens to everybody. Once you get in this rabbit hole, you can't get out of it. You must have talked to people. Once you're in the rabbit hole, it doesn't matter. As people get divorced, the same as if you have a near-death experience. Most people don't realize you have a near-death experience. You say, that's pretty cool. I got experience in near-death experience. 75 to 80% who've had near-death experiences get divorced because they're totally different people. They're down this rabbit hole. They just totally change. And that's what it does. It shifts your life. And if you're on the outside, you can be skeptical or whatever. But once you've had the experience and you realize like this is actually for real and what's going on here, and you start realizing that the world is not the place we think it is, and that's how we can move down the road. And we start to realize it's a lot more, almost like the Nobel Prize this year was given for the whole thing on the entangled spooky action at a distance that Einstein said, oh, that can't be, no, that's not right. Well, it was actually given the Nobel Prize. That's what we're starting to realize. It is this real spooky world where everything is possible. And there's a bunch of assumptions, almost like as long as you believe you've got everything right, you're never going to discover anything. You've got to realize that there's part of it if these phenomena didn't exist, then it'd be okay. But they do exist, which means we got something wrong. Or a friend of mine, one of the guys who flew the craft, they said, where would you like to go? He says, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. He said, okay. He said, put your hand on these chairs in this chair, put your hand there. It's within you. He said, go within yourself and imagine where you want to go. He said, in 1 second, he looked out the window and there was the Milky Way. And I say, this is like 100,000 light years in 1 second. If that story is true, and it is true, I know the guy told me the story, according to what he experienced. If that story is true, we got something wrong with time and space. It's just basically saying, no, it's not what you think it is. And they just keep poking away. And eventually we go, and that's the problem we have inside of government, is the government doesn't understand any better than we do. They understand the consciousness interface. They've understood that since 1950. The Canadians were told, November of 1950, they wrote this top secret memo that said, we were told by American officials that flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States. There's a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush who are trying to figure out what's going on. It's of tremendous significance. And we were also told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. And they're not doing very well because they said if we're working on it, they're willing to exchange credentials. So in 1950, the Americans already knew that mental phenomena, and nobody talked to an alien at the time. Adamski wouldn't appear for 2 years after that. Nobody was talking to aliens at that time. So how did they know there was a mental phenomena? And it may be because when Roswell crashed, they had a live alien, and the live alien was talking in their heads, and they went, oh my God. And that's why they went into MK Ultra. That's why they went in. They were trying to figure out the consciousness thing. They realized that this consciousness, if you can go and talk in Putin's head or tell him he's talking to God or do whatever, there's even a 74 document that talks about apportation, moving stuff around. The 74 DIA document says, if we can perfect this, we can actually go to the enemy. We can go into the vault, get the documents, bring them back to Washington, photocopy the documents, and put them back, and the enemy won't even know we were there. So this is where we're going. That's why the government is interested, because they realize that the military potential. If you can put bulls inside trailers, if you can make stuff appear, disappear, go through walls, this is stuff that we would love to have. And that's why they're never ever going to release this. We talked to the head of the top military think tank in the United States. His name was Dr. Eric Walker. He had 14 honorary doctorate degrees, chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis. And he said to us, why should we change the rules to satisfy your curiosity? You're never going to get it. You're just curious. Admit it. You're just curious. And it was the whole deal is we've got this thing and we're going to figure it out. And just because you want to know, this isn't Santa Claus. We're not going to tell you what's going on. And because they realize the significance of, the threat thing. Oh, if the Russians get it, well, they'll control the world, or the Chinese get it. And so everybody's busy racing around trying to develop it as a weapon and trying to use this technology, because it is absolutely stunning when you see what is actually possible with whatever this intelligence is. I'm less certain as I go along as to what it is. I think it may be all the same thing. It may be the same thing as ghosts and higher spirits, because if you look back in the phenomena, you see 1895, you had wooden ships and all these people were seeing it. Multiple people were seeing it. And there's balloons and there's big lights hanging off these ships. And the guy comes down and says, where are you from? Oh, from Mars. Well, it's changed a lot since 1895, 1896. It became the Foo Fighters, and then it became the green fireballs, then it became the Adamski saucer, then it was triangles, and they just keep changing it. It's not the same phenomenon. It's morphing. And people make the mistake of saying it's this or it's that, and getting stuck in one particular route. And they just keep, every time you think you got to figure it out, they do something really weird that just sort of throws it all, a wrench into the whole thing, and you suddenly realize, like, I have no idea what's going on now. But it's a fantastic story. It's I guess, as I said, I mean, I get to live in the World Cup every single day. I get to see these stories and put the stuff, and people are more interested in, as Walker said, they're more interested in curiosity. They just want to see a UFO thing. There's actually, the Canadians are actually doing a UFO study, and the science advisor to the Prime Minister. And I got some of the documents. I started going after the documents about a briefing they'd given to the minister, the head of the Defense Department in Canada. And I put all this stuff up actually just yesterday on Twitter, and I'm putting it up on Facebook now. And people don't care. They just don't care. They just want to see a UFO photo. You know, UFO photographs. It's like, we really don't know what's going on. It's just, and people get, because that's the stuff that sells. That's the stuff that people like to look at. We're still talking about the Nimitz. It's like Jacques Vallée said. Nimitz is a UFO sighting 20 years ago. It's time to get over it. We're still on Nimitz. We're still on Roswell and stuff like that. And nobody's trying to figure out what's actually going on. They just want to see another photo. They just want to see, hear a story. And that's what Walker said. Curiosity is not sufficient need to know. We are not going to change the rules just to satisfy your curiosity. You're never going to figure it out. Go do something else. Quit wasting my time.
Wow, Grant, you're one of the most fascinating people we've ever interviewed on this subject. And I'm only just getting started with my questions. This would take hours, and we've only got 5 minutes left. The viewers, I'm going to hand this over to the viewers, see if we can get some of their questions answered before we finish. I'm going to sacrifice my questions. All right, so we've got a question from Ray J, and that is, what's the scariest thing you found in your years of investigating?
I guess, the scariest thing that ever happened to me was, people will describe when you get very close to this thing, that it gives off this field of intense fear. I'm not sure what it is. It's to keep you away from the craft. And this thing came at one point. We were chasing these things around. I had some kids with me. And this is 1976. We're chasing these things around. There's these ground lights, which I won't get a long story, but anyway. We're bugging these ground lights, flashing, and they're flashing back and stuff. All of a sudden, I said, "Oh, there's nothing in these little things. The big one's going to come." And I look, and on the American border, there's this thing there, and it actually changes. It starts as an arc welding light, and as it comes around, it comes above the car, and it's a triangle. And as it's coming down, I'm going, "No, don't turn." And it's going, it's moving. I'm going, and suddenly it was like I'm the hunter now. Suddenly I'm the hunted. And it was suddenly at a turn, and I'm going, no, and it makes the turn down the road, and I'm going, oh no, it's coming, and it's coming right down, because we used to chase this thing. It would go so slow we could chase it, and it came right above the car, and it was sitting right above the car. And I remember I said to the kids in the back seat, they were all excited, they were jumping around, and they screaming and yelling. And I said, give me my binoculars. And I remember I was holding the binoculars against the inside of the glass, and I'm trying to hold it against the inside of the windshield to stop my hands from shaking. And I was looking up at this thing, and it was just the most intense fear you could ever possibly imagine. And then it made this sort of a little movement, just the slightest little movement, boom, it was gone. The fear was gone, instantly gone. And then it was back to, let's chase it. And so that was the scariest thing. People will talk about different stuff. It's when it gets out of your control, whether it's near-death experience. If you're trying to control this thing, get ready for a rough ride, because the basic rule in life is this whole surrender thing, that if you're going to try to take this thing on, like the Cubans in 1967 tried to shoot this thing down, and they locked on, and boom, the plane was gone. It was picked up by U.S. intelligence. I mean, if you want to take this thing on, make sure your life insurance is paid up, and that kind of stuff, because it can be very, very dangerous. It's reflective. It will reflect back whatever attitude you're putting out to it. But in terms of scary stuff, that was the only thing I really had at one, and I've done it for a lot of years. I've never been threatened by the government. I've never had any of that kind of stuff happen to me. I've never been threatened by aliens. I've never had anything happen to me. So all that kind of stuff I've never had.
I think we've only got time for one more question, and we've got one from Jake. Which authors are considered the best UFO scholars?
Jacques Vallée. Read Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée, especially his books on his diaries, because I did the same thing. I had a lot of people who stopped talking to me because I'm very open. I figure, like, I'm getting old, and we don't need a second level of cover up here. So I basically tell what I think is going on. And Jacques Vallée does the same thing. He has his Forbidden Science, volumes 1 through 5. He just came out with the 5th one, and basically in the background he tells you what actually happened in all these years. So it goes 10-year periods. And Jacques Vallée is the smartest guy in the room. He has these very smart things that come to the same thing. He says, I'm looking at the screen. He says, rather than looking at the screen, he says, I look behind me in the movie theater and I see this little hole up in the wall with this light coming out of it. And he said, and what I want to do is I want to steal the key. And when everybody goes home, I want to go in that room and find out what's going on. And he understands this principle. It's not what you think it is. It's like a reflection, and you're trying to figure it out, and you got to keep your ego out of the way. And he outs everybody. He basically outs what was going on, who people were talking to, and stuff like that. Fascinating. I think he's the number one reader that people should pay attention to.
The viewers are asking, how do you spell his name?
Jacques Vallée, Vallee, and Jacques, first name. Originally, he worked for GL and Heineken, originally out of France, and is now in Silicon Valley. But he understands it. I used to think he was crazy. I used to think he was insane, because he was on this thing about the fact that it's not what you think it is. I mean, come on, aliens coming from another planet. This doesn't make any sense. I mean, why would they do this? And it's not as physical as people think it is. And now I think he's the greatest guy, because I made the same discoveries he did. It's not this physical thing that people think it is. It's at least 1,000 times more complex, maybe even more than that.
Grant, we've got more guests about to come in. Can you just let the viewers know where they can find you, support you, and follow you?
I have a site. It's all connected, all one word. It's all connected at Weebly. It's a Weebly site. That's where all my books are that I've written. And Twitter is the place, I guess. If you're into UFO conspiracy, follow me on Twitter, Grant Cameron at Twitter. I'm putting up all these documents from the Canadian government now, and I post a lot of stuff during the day. So.
Well, huge thank you so much for that. I've been mesmerized by what you've just said. And I think we'd love to get you back on to give a much fuller account and get through all the questions that come in, because there's just tons of them outstanding. But thank you for spending time with us, Grant. Cheers.
I appreciate what you're doing and your interest.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.